Hi guys, it's Deborah. Welcome to my channel. So in this video, I'm doing my 90-day update, 90 days of doing alternate day fasting. And I'm gonna share in the form of a photo compilation, kind of where I started my journey from when I was younger and all the stuff that has happened in my life leading up to alternate day fasting, and just share my progress and all that kind of stuff. So let's go. Hi guys, so this is my 90-day alternate day fasting update. Like I said, I'm going to share sort of where I started leading up to alternate day fasting in the form of a bunch of pictures, and then just share what's happened to me in those 90 days and also where I'm going, which is onwards and upwards. So here it is. So then as a teenager, I'm about 16, I think. And obviously I was like, you know, a very proportioned weight. But just thinking back, like I was probably bigger than most girls my age. And I thought I was bigger. I don't believe I was thinking I was fat. So then this is when I believe I was, I'm going to say 18-ish, and I was really active in those days. So this is me. I was 19. I got pregnant with my first baby. So I was just past that Madonna picture and still very slim, busy. And so I was pregnant, didn't really gain much weight with my first baby. But it was a big shock to my body. I was only 19 and, you know, so I was dealing with things that most 19-year-olds didn't deal with. Then I had my first baby, and 10 months, there's only 10 months between them. So when she was 4 or 6 weeks old, I got pregnant with my second baby. So my body didn't even have time to readjust to having a baby. I was all of a sudden pregnant again. But starting in my late 20s, that started to become a bit of a challenge. And so here's a picture of me. I was hardly not overweight, but I would say I was in the 140s in this picture, just because life was busy and stressful. So I would imagine, I don't remember exactly, but there was probably a lot of stress eating. It's kind of when that kind of dynamic was starting to happen for me. So that was when my kids were little. And then up to when they were like preteens, that's when the dieting situation started to really come into my world. You know, I was maintaining my weight at around that 140-ish mark. But then I started running, and I found that running was a really great outlet for me. But I was running a lot. In this picture, I was probably running 1 to 2 hours a day. So during that time, yeah, my weight had gone down to, I was in the 120s, but it had even dropped at one point to 115. I remember I was skinny, but I was like skinny fat. And what was happening during that time were celebrity diets. So that's when the real restrict-binge pattern was born. It was doing extreme diets, lots of exercise in the form of cardio. I would just do straight cardio and then also restrict. But I was doing things like the South Beach diet, where you just eat, it was basically skinless, boneless chicken breast without any fat, and broccoli, like tons of broccoli, I remember. And then that was not sustainable for me. And also at that time, a lot of celebrity trainers were selling their products, their ebooks, I remember. And it would be, eat this so restrictive diet until Saturday or Sunday. And also it was micro meals. So, have an apple for breakfast and then some kind of a cereal bar that was really low fat or something along those lines. And then you had, a can of tuna for lunch, and then a string cheese for your next snack. And then your dinner was some minute amount of food, but often. And then I started on that, follow that strictly and then have a cheat meal. So that continued, and I maintained my weight. Probably it went from like the 125 to once the restrict-binge kind of pattern began, up to about within my late 20s, 30s, was about 140-ish, thereabouts, maybe even got up to about 145. I was having some success in staying slimmer with the calorie restriction and then having a cheat meal. And then these cheat meals became a cheat day because I was so restrictive. And on those, especially during the cheat day, I would binge. I would literally, and they would encourage that. Just go eat like a huge hamburger and have ice cream and chocolate, like get it all in on that one day and then start on this hyper restrictive diet with all these little micro meals. That is where probably the most damage was done for me. So then coming into my late 30s, I was still kind of doing that, but less so. My career was getting off the ground and I was really busy, and so I was still going to the gym and only ever really doing cardio. I think I started to kind of get a little bit into strength training. Close to that time, I was doing more of a Weight Watchers style, so it was counting calories, counting macros, and just trying to get all those numbers dialed in, always craving something. So I would just basically, I was doing what I had done before. I would eat these like really low point foods, and you were allowed to eat as much vegetables as you want. So I would fill up on that and then, eat like a chocolate bar. I forget how many points, but it would eat up a massive amount. So it wasn't really shifting for me. The restricting, binging was sort of somehow ingrained in me, and it followed me all through the years. So when I was 40 here, I became a grandmother. So my daughter had her baby when she was quite young. I think she was 19 or 20. So now I'm a grandmother, but I was still really active. I started that time doing more outdoor activities. I was living on the West Coast, so I was biking a lot. I used to bike back and forth to work, and then my responsibilities at work were starting to increase. So I was eating a little bit more normal, but still doubling down on exercise. And I'd ride my bike to work, which was a very busy job, ride my bike to the gym, work out, ride my bike home, and eat a big dinner. And yeah, so that carried me through pretty much my 40s. I was kind of in that cycle, and my weight was fluctuating between around 140, 150. So then somewhere around age 42 or 43, I had left. I used to work in healthcare, and I had started my own business, a healthcare related business. So my responsibilities were like tripled. And I was running the business by myself, and it was it was administrative based. So I was sitting for minimum of 10 hours a day. I was busy and, doing things, but during that time, and I ran that business up until 2019, and just got more and more sedentary and more trying to challenge, because the weight started to creep up like not fast, but I started to then do more things around really restricting and then having these cheat meals or yeah. Well, it went from really restricting for 2 or 3 days and then having cheat meals or cheat days actually. And then, you know, I started to lose that balance between using that method of restrict-binge to keep my weight at I think I was in the 140s, 150s around that time. So then around that time, especially in my early 50s, I started to do, because my job was so sedentary and I didn't really have the time to go and do these crazy cardio things that were working for me in the past, then I started doing extreme dieting. I remember the first thing I did, I don't know if anybody remembers back in the day, Freely the Banana Girl. I had found her, and plus I had been in this social drinking a lot, and I wanted to kind of clean that out. I had left that relationship where that was a huge component of that. And then, so I wanted to get really healthy. So I was basically a raw vegan diet, but the thing that was being promoted was, you know, I would make this smoothie in the morning of like 10 bananas, 10 dates in my massive Vitamix, and then you just drink that all through the morning. And I believe, I was still running my business up until 2019. So I would do that and then sit all day, and you know, your lunch was something like 5 to 10 mangoes, and then for supper you would have like corn pasta, but no oil, no salt. And I remember eating this corn pasta, which has the most disgusting texture to me, with like some super bland tomato sauce. So I did that for quite a while until eventually it wasn't pleasurable to me, or I was eating way too many carbs and sugary carbs. And so I would start eating more. And then I started making like raw vegan desserts and just overeating on raw vegan foods, and it was really bad for me. I think that's probably what started some blood sugar issues. And then from there, I transitioned to different forms of vegan. Shortly thereafter, I had found high carb. Well, that was still high carb, but more of and not so raw, because I was pretty much eating raw vegan. So then I found cooked food, but it was still no fat and no salt. And that was a problem for me. And then that started I would do, you know, these things really strictly for a few weeks, and then go and have my cheat meal. So, you know, so always in between each thing that one of these extreme diets, I would, you know, go back to some kind of junk food style diet. And really, like, in my brain, I was like, okay, just go crazy, do this, and then I'll go strict on this new plan. And then I would quit and go on this massive junk food phase, and then I would start another extreme diet. So I did keto on and off throughout those years. So I would do hardcore keto, and then I would do some kind of vegan, and I would go to these extremes. But in between each one, I would let myself just go nuts and eat chocolate and chips and hamburgers and McDonald's, and then I would go so radically strict on something. And that yo-yo, that pendulum was getting more and more extreme, and I was getting a lot more anxiety because my weight by that time, I was well into the 150 pound, 160. And I remember as it was getting closer to 160, there was this panicked feeling because I didn't feel good. You know, I'm a smaller frame. I'm only 5'3", and so clothes, any amount of that much extra weight to me, I just didn't feel good. I was walking, so back in that day, it was like 10,000 steps. Well, because I couldn't really run anymore, and I didn't really have a whole bunch of time, so I would do kind of like this speed walking, and I would try to get to 20,000 steps, and that's kind of where I was at. And it wasn't really effective, other than it was an outlet and it was some form of exercise, because at that point too, my business was so stressful, and I was working long hours and having to sit. So then in 2019, I ended my business, that healthcare related, administrative based business. I had shut it down. I was really not happy with a lot of things in my life. So that business ended, and I was living on an island on the beach. And so I was starting to become really active with kayaking, and again, still walking. And then from 2019, I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was kind of like in a midlife type of thing. And then I got really heavily into kayaking. So I went from operating a kayak business to, in 2020, I had a business partner and we bought the kayak business. It was a kayak rental and bike business. So I was busy. I was just kind of trying to eat healthy, but I wasn't really watching anything because I was just busy, physically busy. So that business, we opened the doors the very beginning of March of 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and where the area that I lived in was like complete lockdown. And this business that we were running was on another little island, and the only access to the island, because it was also, a campsite, it was like a nature setting, but the only way to get there was by ferry. And then, so that was super stressful. That was 2020. So by the summer of 2020, I was not in a good place. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had like these massive career changes and just feeling a bit lost. So I had moved off the island and I was in a town, and I just resorted again to walking and, going through the process of trying to reestablish my career in my 50s. It was very stressful. So it was around that time that I started to try to do keto again. And at the end of 2020, I had abdominal surgery. I had like an abdominal surgery, and during the procedure, the surgeon had nicked an artery in my abdomen, and it was really a traumatic surgery. So I was in the hospital on IV, antibiotics, all that kind of stuff. And then I came home and I was on bed rest for 12 weeks. So I was basically just not moving at all. And the stress and the anxiety and wanting to move, I couldn't do any of that. So I had started at that time too. I did this raw juicing protocol. Basically, I was just juicing. I mean, I would juice like a huge watermelon with a beet and some lemon, and then just drink that all day. And then I was doing a lot of vegetable juices, and I had started growing wheatgrass and getting into like microgreens, but it was pretty much raw until I couldn't take it. And then as I was healing, from my surgery, I would go and get junk food. So after that, I had a pretty major move. I moved a long way away from the area that I was used to. I'm a real beach person. And I moved up north because my family was up here, and the whole COVID restrictions was just off the charts. And so anyway, I made a decision to move closer to my family, which is in northern British Columbia. So the weather was different. Like, everything was really stressful. And then I had started a new job. I decided I wanted, because the community up here is very limited. And so I decided to go back to the hospital, which was probably my worst mistake. So that healthcare job was a total nightmare. It was just not in any way, shape, or form in alignment with who I am. And then that was probably the last straw for me in terms of stress. And I just went really like into a dark place. I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I was frustrated and angry and disillusioned, and yeah, I just felt completely lost. And then I just didn't care. So I just started eating McDonald's, and financially I was really, everything in my life was falling apart. And I was just like frozen. So I remember I would just eat McDonald's. I didn't care. I was eating chocolate bars. There was no bouncing back anymore. And that went on, that went on right up until the summer of 2022. So back in August. And in August, I was so overweight. Well, I didn't get on the scale. Like, I started ADF at the end of July, the 1st of August. So that summer, I was so overweight that I was not even able, I was worried about being able to walk up and down the stairs where I lived, and basically just, it was at the lowest point of my life. I was 189.4 just before I started alternate day fasting. And it was like my lifeline. So I do share in my last, I believe it was my 60-day update, how I found alternate day fasting. But so I'll just share with you kind of how, from starting alternate day fasting to where I am today. So I'm in day 94. So my first 90 days was really just establishing my foundation. And I share a lot about how I built that foundation. I knew what I needed. I needed so much structure. I needed to have just something. And I knew, for me at that time, because of where I was at, I needed to have little micro goals to just build up that momentum. So it started with my very strict fasting protocol. And then I decided I was already eating completely a junk food diet for the previous 6 months. So I wasn't like, I don't know how I'm going to live without McDonald's or chips or chocolate. I had ran that way of eating totally into the ground. But I also didn't want to do anything extreme. I didn't want to do keto. I didn't want to do all those extreme diets because I knew where they were going to lead, and I just didn't know how I was going to incorporate an eating plan into alternate day fasting by the time I knew that I was going to do it. And also just before, within the last 2 years before I started alternate day fasting, I did 16-8, so some intermittent fasting I was incorporating. But I believe the reason why 16-8 didn't really work for me was within my 8-hour eating window, because I was doing 16-8 every day. So even though my eating window was 8 hours, I was probably eating more than I should have. But I did like the structure. I really adapted well to fasting, not eating breakfast, and then I thought, okay, well, if 16-8 was working and I didn't have any problems with the fasting, and then OMAD was a big thing and everybody was losing a lot of weight, so I tried that, and that was really what, for me, it didn't work on it. At a really found it just didn't work. Any of these things are working for anybody. That's amazing. But so I'm just sharing how these different things didn't work for me and why, and kind of the background of what I was coming from, this kind of restrict binge that played a big part in why a lot of these things didn't work, and hormones and surgery and stress, right? So yeah, so when I did OMAD, it was the same thing. I would fast for those 22 hours and then completely binge on, and because too, now that I have a better understanding of the fasting, the mechanisms of fasting and what happens to your body, and I didn't know that back then, the things I know now, is my hormones were, particularly ghrelin, I share in one of my videos about OMAD versus ADF, I think, was by the time I got to my eating window, I was like raging hungry. So there was no way I could stick within my TDEE, factoring in a deficit and keeping, so I don't know, my calories should have been probably about 1,400 to 1,800, but I was eating in those 2 hours, like, yeah, literally, who knows, probably around 3,000 calories, because I would begin my eating window in this frenzied state of hunger. So it was almost impossible for me to, rationalize sitting down and having a soup, a salad, and just a normal meal. It just didn't work for me. So when I found ADF, I was worried because I thought, oh my God, I remember, like, OMAD just didn't work for me at all. And I was kind of scared to go into that extended fast thinking I would like completely binge again. Because it was almost like I didn't have the control, and I felt really bad about that. And I just didn't want to fail. I didn't feel like I could fail at anything else for the last 2 or 3 years. So many things. I was just like, I needed something to work. And so I decided to put my heart and soul into alternate day fasting. And the first few fasts that I did, by the time I was ready to open my eating window, which has been between 36 and 40 hours, I wasn't hungry. I was so amazed. I was like, oh my God, I think I found my thing. So when I would open my eating window, especially in the first 2 to 3 days, I've been documenting my ADF journey from day one. So if you're interested, you can go back and take a look at those early days. It's a little bit crazy. I don't go back there too often, but So anyway, so I was eating whatever I wanted, because that's what brought me to alternate day fasting, was eat whatever you want. And so I really did. So what happened in the later, leading up to my 90 days was, so the beginning of my journey was really focusing on my fast. And then I knew I had to work on my diet at some point. And I had started on doing plant-based again. But I was just kind of doing whatever I wanted within that eating window, plant-based. So I was eating tons of oatmeal, and it was good. I was feeling healthy. But because I share this in my most recent updates, is it just wasn't going well. I was dealing with a lot of bloating and heartburn and different things. So I've more recently just switched to a shorter eating window. So kind of going back to those 3 meals a day, and just incorporating more protein. And I'm doing that in some different ways. So I've just recently switched that up, but it feels good to me. And I really do feel, for me, that a shorter eating window really works well, because I was eating late at night and just a bunch of different things. So I just want to share too, I don't know how to quantify this, but how so many things have changed for me on an emotional level. I've also been dealing with the emotional eating side of things. When things get challenging or difficult, I know that I need to address those things. But having the structure of alternate day fasting, and I made a specific video about that, on where I'm at with that. But having that safety net that, if that does happen, and it's only ever within my eating window, because when I'm in my fast, like it's like I have two rooms, and this is how it has to work for me. When I'm in the fasting room, I don't even really like contemplate the eating window. I'm just whatever's going on for me fasting wise, and then when that is over, it's like I walk through a door and I'm into the other room, which is my eating window, and then I deal with all the stuff around my eating. So I've really compartmentalized it. It's worked for me so that I can deal with the specific issues related to my fasting and the specific issues related to my eating window. So, you know, that mental shift for me was what I needed to, because I have health issues to work on, emotional issues to work on, gut health. Like it was a lot. There was a lot on my plate that I needed to accomplish using alternate day fasting. So there was that. And as I'm working through these things, like my life is changing exponentially. Like, so the shifts that are taking place for me are not what I could have ever imagined. So on a physical level, you know, I'm losing weight, I'm losing body fat, my muscle mass is increasing. I'm working on my gut health and sort of hormonal things because of all these past things that have gone on in my life. So those are things that are important to me. You know, I'm 54, and I want to spend the rest of my days on this planet as amazing as I can and start to bring back the things I love, like cycling and hiking and kayaking. And now I have a grandson and I want to keep up with him. He's like, he's going to be a very active little guy. And my kids, they're active as well. So these are the things that I want to accomplish, and I am, and I see the shifts and change. It's very remarkable to me. So there's that. And then also like my confidence level. When I first started documenting my journey, it was as a form of accountability for me, because I wanted to have, that was the tracking method that I chose. I really didn't know, like once I made the decision to start posting it on YouTube, I was just going minute by minute. It really was. And then, and it was scary for me to show myself. I'd always hidden. I've always been the kind of person who hid these eating issues, but I didn't want to. Like my whole thing was just open up, be vulnerable, expose who I am, because that other intention was so many people who were doing that were helping me. It was so inspiring, like unbelievably. And I'm so grateful for those people. So I started to realize that maybe this can be something that I can do and just share. Like I'm just a real girl living in my real world. But, there's not a lot of glitz and glam to me, but I get so much value when I hear people say to me, "You're inspiring me." Like, I don't even know how to explain it. It just, that part for me is amazing. And in this process, I'm reestablishing my confidence level and, being before the camera, sharing all these like really vulnerable things and the pictures and all that. So and just being before the camera every single day. Like I document a video every day. So that's it, guys. This is my 90-day update. I'm definitely moving forward with alternate day fasting, and some of my goals moving into the next leg of this journey is to continue to work on my eating window and foods that are better aligned with the goals that I want. So I'll be sharing that in the coming days in my weekly updates, and then also incorporating more activity. Like I want to make commitments to go to the gym, but I'm trying to work out schedules and everything. So that's also a big part of what's going to be coming up for me. Yeah, so those two things. I've lost 20 pounds in 90 days, and my goal is to lose 50. But I think as I put more of these pieces together, I really see that weight loss goal more realistic for me every day. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm super excited, and I'm going to share more. I'm going to keep doing my weekly vlogs, and then I'm going to share more content that resonates with me, that I feel like I want to share. So thank you guys for watching my video. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to see more content from me and more updates, hit subscribe. I really do appreciate it. I'm trying to grow my channel. So every subscriber, I value you. I'm grateful for you. And yeah, so that's it, guys. I will see you in my next video. Take care.